Everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time in this busy schedule and for your attending here to come to this session. My name is Miguel Zamora. I am the coordinator of the Coffee Public Private Task Force of the International Coffee Organization. Today, we are organizing this session. Thank you to the support of the European Union and our allies and many members of the task force who can come together today and talk a little bit about, especially potential new information and news, and discuss the different issues that the European Union has been doing around EUDR, but also we'll talk a little bit about the work that the ICO with the task force is trying to do to support its members and to try to provide more information that can be helpful to members. As a reminder, the International Coffee Organization is the only intergovernmental organization in coffee that is formed by producing and consuming countries. We have 75 members. Most of the coffee production, around 93% of the coffee produced in the world, is represented in the ICO, and most of the coffee consumed too. And we work in different issues with our members, which are the governments of producing countries and consuming countries. And one of our members, the European Union, has agreed to work today and help us with this. As you can see, this is a hybrid event, so we will have attendees online. We have a lot of people joining online, in addition to the presenters who are joining online because for several issues, there is travel restrictions. In some cases, some organizations that haven't been able to come here. So we will have presentation and then a Q&A session. Then we'll have other presentations and then a Q&A session at the end. So we will have time for you to ask questions directly. Angelica, next slide, please. Today, we will have several presenters. We will hear from Vanusia Nogueira, the Executive Director of the International Coffee Organization. She will open up the session and talk a little bit about what we're here. Then we will hear from two members of the EU DG Environment Group. We will have Antoine Hauschwing. Sorry, Antoine, if I just butchered your last name. I really tried. And Gabor Lobasi. And they will be presenting on different topics important or relevant to information about the EUDR. Then we will have Zoltan Agai, from EU DG Impact, who will talk especially around the Team Europe initiative and what relates to EUDR in the work that we have been doing. And we thank Zoltan a lot for helping us to organize this session. She's a close member of the task force who's always supporting the different initiatives that we put together. After that, we will hear from Hannelore Berland. She's the coordinator of the Technical Workstream 3 of the Coffee Public Private Task Force, and she's been doing a lot of work around EUDR, providing information to members and gathering information from members and different technical assistance providers. So that information is available for people as they prepare to be ready for EUDR implementation. And finally, we will have to hear from Isabel Lemens from the European Coffee Federation. And she will talk a little bit about the perspective of companies, especially in Europe, what they're doing to prepare to comply with EUDR and what early learnings we're gathering from that information. So that's the idea of the session. We will have, after Antoine and Gabor present, we will have time for questions. And after Zoltan, Hannelore, and Isabel present, we will have time for questions. Okay? So that will be the idea for today. Next slide, Angelica. Yes, sorry. It will be like with more specifics. We will have hopefully plenty of time, and we will play with the time. There's time available when there is needed for more sessions, but we will have plenty of time for Q&A for any questions, especially any technical questions, clarifying questions that you may have and that you would like to provide. And we will hear also from Hannelore the review of the collective initiative working for EUDR compliance work that we are doing in the task force to try to understand better what's happening around compliance with EUDR. So that's the idea for the session today. Next, please. So with that, I would like to welcome Vanusia, Executive Director at the ICO, for opening remarks of the session.
Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning, good evening to all of the people that are with us virtually. It will not be an opening remarks. It will be just to say hello to all of you. Some years ago, almost 2 years ago, ICO signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Specialty Coffee Association, and we agreed to have every year in this show, during the World of Coffee show, one session for discussion about one highest topic that we have. Hello.
We could hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, but the problem is there. Some people used to say that I have a megaphone. I know that here it's not a problem, but I'm not sure if they can hear me. Veronica, can you hear me without the microphone?
Loud and clear, Vanusia. Please go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Then we started to organize these meetings every year, and we select this subject for this year because we know that this is one of the top priorities for our sector during this year and until the end of the year at least, and probably for the following years as well. It's very good to take this moment to be very clear that all of us would like to save the planet. All of us would like to stop the deforestation. This is not the point. We are here to follow and to have the guidance from our colleagues, our partners from the European Commission, and how to get there. Okay, and then on this side, I'd like to thank a lot Zoltan for all the partnership. Zoltan, it's the delegate, the official delegate from the European Union, together with us in the ITO. It's a person that it's working very close to us almost every week, trying to do this partnership and to address the most challenging points that we have in our sector. And Zoltan helped us to make this session feasible and viable with his colleagues from the DG Inc. And I would like now to thank Antoine and Gabor for their time to be with us. Hannelore is working for our task force. Many of you already met Hannelore, and Hannelore is a consultant contracted by the European Commission to work with us, and she has been very supportive on that. And Isabel, it's also a very good partner from ECF, from the European Federation, and they will be all together in this open discussion today. The idea is to have 2 hours, 1 hour and 50 minutes right now, to receive some inputs from them, and then to open for questions from you, and they will try to answer these questions as better as they can, and they are available to do right now. This is our point right now. And again, I only would like to thank all of you for being here with us. And we will be here until Saturday if you would like to discuss any other point with ICO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanusia. Angelica, now let's please put the first presentation. So the first presenter today will be Antoine. And Antoine and the presenters, please, I will appreciate if you could introduce yourself at the start, just so people have a little bit of an idea of your role. So we can do that when we start for every presentation. So we can now project the next presentation. Excellent. So let's put it in presentation mode.
Okay, maybe I can start while it's going to be displayed in presentation mode. So good afternoon, everyone from Brussels. I'm Anton Naushin, here in the room with my colleague Gabor Lovashi. We are working in the European Commission, DG Environment, in the International Directorate, and in particular, we are working on the deforestation regulation, trying in these very specific moments to prepare the entry into application, but I will come back to that. That's good. Thank you very much. So if you allow me, I will very quickly recall the overall landscape and the major steps that led us to this regulation before going into more detail on where we stand with the preparation of the entry application, which is the core elements of our discussion today. So maybe to remind the first elements, the deforestation is still today a key driver of climate change and biodiversity loss. And this is indeed the main objective of this regulation, to fight against deforestation and minimizing EU's contribution to deforestation and forest degradation worldwide. So maybe on the next slide, please. Very quickly here, I will just focus on two elements that you might already know, but the entry into force of the EUDR was in June 2023. And we are now approaching and having in mind the entry into application on the 30th of December 2024. So the European Commission, with the member states in close cooperation, with also partner countries and stakeholders, we are now focusing on ensuring the smooth operationalization of the rule. So we will discuss it. So next slide, please. Again, just to have the main elements in mind, and I'll be quick on this one as well. Some core elements of the regulation, important to be underlined. You know that the main principle is therefore the obligation for EU operators and traders to carry out a due diligence procedure before placing a product on the EU market that will ensure non-deforestation. So this due diligence is based on several principles. Legal and zero deforestation products are authorized and must be covered by a declaration of due diligence provided by the information system. My colleague Gabor will come back on these specific elements. The definitions that are used in the regulation are based on the FAO to ensure the international recognitions. Also that obligations are mainly applicable to non-SME operators and traders. And the core principle is therefore strict traceability required via the obligation to provide the geolocation of all plots of land, linking therefore the commodity to where it was produced. The legality aspect as well, product will need to be legal according to the laws of country of production. Next slide, please. So maybe give you an update on where we stand on the ongoing work from the Commission side. In the 6 months remaining, we focus then on the implementation. As I mentioned, close cooperation with member states, partner countries, different stakeholders as well. And this includes streams of work like the FAQs, frequently asked questions, the guidelines and the information system, as well as the deforestation platform, which is our main channel of communication, but also the EU Observatory and some others. Next slide, please. So to enter a bit more into the frequently asked questions. So the obligation in the regulation are clearly set, but those FAQ comes to facilitate the understanding on some specific elements. So in June 23, you are aware that we have published the first FAQ document that aimed at clarifying several aspects of the regulation. Last update was in December. And the next updated version, I would have been happy to being able to stand here with you saying it has been published, but it's not the case yet. Unfortunately, it will be published in the next weeks. We are waiting for some political validations. But on this new updated version, for which I take the opportunity to thank to who have already sent questions and input, thereby actually actively contributed to fit this document, because this is how we work. We work based on this specific FAQ document. We based on the question we received from your side, and then try to share some light on specific elements. Element being the following. For the next additions, you will find in this new FAQ some elements. It's not exhaustive, but some clarification on interpretation of Article 7, which is the EU operators, which is established in certain countries. Some additional details on the functioning of the information system, including interplay with other EU policies. Some precision on due diligence obligation, type of information to be submitted, precision on geolocation, clarification on traceability for product trade in bulk, also for composite product or for packing made of relevant commodities. So we trust that this next edition will bring clarity on some of these aspects. And again, this is also something we've worked with deeply with member states, also to ensure a smooth and uniform interpretation and enforcement of the law. Member states, being the competent authority, will have to enforce the regulation, and it will be the bodies in charge of enforcement. Next slide, please. The guidance document now, which will elaborate a bit further on different aspects of the regulation. The guidance document stays within the boundaries of the legal text. It is useful reference for anyone who needs to comply with the EUDR, and it further clarifies some specific part of the legislative text, especially for you as operators and traders. So it can also guide national authorities in their enforcement processes. But again, important to mention that the EUDR builds on the significant experience that the member states gained during the EUTR, the timber regulation. Therefore, we had an in-depth consultation with them to improve the text, to enter into a bit more detail. Some specific chapters will be talking about the definition of placing on the market or making available on the market, export, this kind of topics. The agricultural use, which is part of the legal text, it was mandatory to develop about agricultural use. The risk assessment and definition of negligible risk will be a bit further developed. Clarification of the complexity of the supply chain as well. Some due diligence regarding the legality. This will be a bit, we're receiving many questions about that. This will touch upon this legality aspect, but also on the clarification of the product scope and on the regular maintenance of the due diligence, or many other topics like you can see now on the screen. So the procedure to adopt the guidance document is ongoing. We aim to publish the document as a commission notice it will be published in the official journal because it's a legally binding document during summer. So if we can move to next slide, and I will pass the floor to my colleague Gabor to elaborate a bit more on the information system, which is also a core element of this regulation. Gabor, please.
Thank you, Antoine, and good afternoon. So briefly about the information system. This will be a repository of due diligence statements that the operators who place the products first time on the market have to use after the due diligence exercise to submit a so-called due diligence statement in which they assume responsibility that the product that they place on the market are compliant with the regulation. We already had a pilot testing with over 100 companies from a balanced pool of testers. This took place between December 2023 to end of January this year. A little bit about the roadmap. The Commission will share informative videos about the information system throughout the summer, about the functioning of the information system, starting from how to register in the information system, how to submit a due diligence statement, how to use a reference number, so far, so forth. Detailed user instructions will be disseminated from September, and the Commission will start trainings from October. The system will open for registration from the beginning of November, and the system will start So the system will be launched for the operators and traders to start submitting due diligence statement from 2nd of December. This will give close to 1 month for all interested stakeholders to submit their due diligence statements and introduce it, for example, in the customs declaration, the reference number that they receive. The Commission has developed the receiving side of an application programming interface, a so-called API, which will allow machine-to-machine connection between the operators and traders or their authorized representatives to the information system, and will allow upload or submit of due diligence statements and their management within the system. The technical specifications are already available on the Commission website, and to join to this information system via an API, this will require passing a so-called conformance testing to ensure that the data exchange and the communication between the machines are done in a proper manner. So the operators are sending the right information in the right format, in the right way, and the information system can receive and process those. Briefly, this is about the information system, and after the presentation, we are ready to take questions around that. Thank you.
May I ask to go to the next slide, please? A word on the EU Observatory on deforestation. The EU Observatory is now publicly available online, allowing to check if a specific location corresponds to an area that might have been forest at the cutoff date of 2020. This is the global forest map published by our colleague at the Joint Research Center. The objective is to facilitate information, and of course, the map produced by the observatory is not mandatory or legally binding, but they are there to inform risk assessment by operators. So it could be also complementary with other tools. It's here to help. Maybe last slide, please. Thank you. Just a quick word before giving the floor to my colleague Zoltan, more specifically on the cooperation, but just wanted to say that this is the one of the most important working area for us, and also a legal obligation under the regulation, with a double purpose to explain what the regulation is exactly about, to rationalize its requirements, but also to engage with third countries in the best way to support the transition toward the deforestation-free supply chain. So I will not elaborate further on this one, but rather give the floor or pass on my colleague Zoltan for more about cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antoine and Gabor, for the presentation. Then we will have the presentation from Zoltan Agay from DG Impact. If we can put the next presentation, and Zoltan, thank you. Just so you all can see the room, it keeps on filling. This is room for 60 people capacity, and we're almost there. Plus, we have close to 80 people online joining us today too. So thank you so much to everybody who's been able to take the time to come today for this session. So now I give the floor to Zoltan. Zoltan, again, if you can give like a quick introduction for people, and then thank you for taking the time for presenting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel, and good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon, Vanusia. Thank you for the very kind intro words. I have the honor to be the official delegate of the EU member states at the International Coffee Organization. And I do my best to be present in most of these events. So I'll do a quick, very quick presentation on the cooperation aspects, and this links very well with Antoine's final words. So if you could go to the first slide, please. during the COP28 in Dubai, the EU and a few member states, including Germany, the Netherlands, and France, collectively launched a global Team Europe initiative on deforestation-free value chains with a dedicated fresh financing package that now reaches more than 80 million euros. Next slide, please. The overall strategic objective is to offer a coherent Team Europe approach for inclusive partnerships on deforestation-free value chains. And this includes notably a focus on the Global South to address all commodities that are included in the EUDR, facilitating an inclusive transition to deforestation-free and legal supply chains to the EU, so as to minimize the EU's contribution to global deforestation and forest degradation, and also coordination mechanism to coordinate existing and forthcoming initiatives and projects by the EU and its member states relevant to complying with the EUDR. Next slide, please. Here you can see what I would call the three conceptual pillars of the TEI. The first pillar would be knowledge management with studies, publications, working groups, workshops. The second, very important, is the coordination of all EUDR-related activities. And the third pillar on outreach for support to multi-stakeholder policy dialogues, partnerships, events, presentations to explain the regulation, etc. Next slide, please. Here you can see the concrete structure of the TEI. There is what we call a steering committee at the level of the Commission and the member states. Then, most importantly, what we call the TEI hub, which has a budget of 3 million euros, but we are now up to 5 with additional contributions. This hub will provide information and outreach to partner countries. It will conduct knowledge management to better coordinate relevant pre-existing projects from the EU and member states with the upcoming activities dedicated specifically to deforestation-free value chains. This will ensure that all relevant activities in producing countries are better aligned, gaps identified, and redundancies avoided. Then you can see the SAFE program, SAFE, which stands for Sustainable Agriculture for Forest Ecosystems. This is a big project with a budget of 60 million euros. It's implemented by GIZ, and it's the TEI's most important cooperation pillar. It has already ongoing activities in a number of countries: Brazil, Ecuador, Indonesia, Zambia, the DR, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Vietnam. And further country components are already being considered, such as in Cameroon, Peru, and Uganda, to be added already in 2024. The project focuses on support to smallholders in their transition to sustainable and deforestation-free value chains. It also aims to assist producing countries in creating environments to ensure access to the EU market. And it will be further scaled up to cover more countries through upcoming additional financial contributions from member states. Then, as you see, there's also the technical facility, which for now has a budget of 7 million euros. It's implemented by the European Forest Institute. It's a flexible and on-demand instrument to assist producing countries with expertise on technical requirements, such as geolocation, land use mapping, and traceability, with a particular focus on smallholders. And these activities will be closely coordinated with the EU delegations. And when I say that they are coordinated with EU delegations are in contact with the partner countries. So all this to align with pre-existing projects and create synergies and avoid duplications with new projects. France has recently pledged to reinforce this facility with an additional contribution of 5 million euros. This technical facility is already up and running. We already have received requests from Ethiopia, Tanzania, Rwanda, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Colombia, Honduras, and Nicaragua through our delegations, which again means that discussions are ongoing also with national authorities. Now, to finish at the overall picture, at the bottom of the structure, you can see examples of existing projects that also cover already EUDR-related matters. To name a few, we have Arinvest Verde program that covers traceability in several South American countries like Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, or Colombia. We have Café y Bosques, which is a regional program in Central America with activities in Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. We have a markup program, markup 2 program covering East Africa in Burundi, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And we have also a number of bilateral projects. And this TEI is meant to better coordinate all of these activities. I'll stop here and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sultan. Thank you, Antoine. Thank you, Gabor, for the presentations. We are going to open now for Q&A first before the next presentation. So let's just maybe open the cameras. Sorry, maybe just open the. Let's stop the presentation, and let's just leave. So the screens are bigger. Exactly. Thank you. So people can see the presenters more clearly. Now we want to open to questions. There are going to be likely some questions on the chat that my colleagues are going to pass, and then we're going to have questions from the audience. Please ask the question to the mic so they can hear you, because of the technology, how we're working on that. So especially if we don't focus on clarifying questions, technical questions, that's also always welcome. So the first question, please your name, your organization, and your question if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Paul Appelsbo from Traboka and Trident Organic in the Netherlands. And I was wondering to the last presenter, Zoltan, how can we make sure that our suppliers, which are mostly smallholder farmers and cooperatives, are aware of these funded programs that the EU is funding? And is there any sort of central information point where we can connect our suppliers to and get them trained, get capacity building going so that they are actually capable of providing the required data?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that question. Sultan, could you hear it well?
Yes, I could. I'm not sure I understand fully, but I'll try to respond. The bottom line is that the entry point to everything we do is when it comes to producing countries is our delegations. So if you want to connect structures that you know about, or companies, or cooperatives, the first entry point will be the delegation. But also once the TEI hub will also act as an entry point. It's not yet fully up and running. But it's also you can use not me specific. Well, I can provide a bit later an entry point at headquarters level, because we have a colleague. I'm not actually dealing directly with this TI. I'm covering for the colleague in charge. His name is Simon Miner, and he can also be a contact point if you need more information.
Thank you. And so just to clarify, when you mentioned delegation, you mean the EU delegation?
EU delegations. Yes, EU delegations, yes.
That would be the EU representative there in country, and until the TI website is more available with more information and more detail. Thank you. Any other question from the audience on this information so far? We have another question, Sultan. Me first, me, you can.
Not too sure it's on this topic, one. Hi, this is Vic Wheeler from the Papua New Guinea Coffee Industry Corporation. I'm not quite sure who I'm going to direct my question to, but I'd like some clarification on the countrywide approach or the territorial approach that's been adopted by some of the agencies as certifying that the country is deforestation free. There's a rumour that the EU has decided that with that approach would not be acceptable. I wonder if anyone could confirm that or deny it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Could you hear the question properly first? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to reply now or you take several questions? As you
Why don't we
prefer.
do that, maybe, and then we go to the next question, because we have time. I think that we'll go with time, so maybe we do that, and maybe your answer helps to a different question.
Okay, I'm not sure I got your message. It was difficult to hear, but let me answer this one maybe, because it's a very interesting one and very important as well. On this famous territorial approach and the rumor that the Commission might or not accept. I think there is a misunderstanding about that because the Commission is not accepting or not a specific system, a specific approach. There are some requirements in the regulation, which is the EU operators needs to fulfill the due diligence, give the geolocation requirements, and this is what it is required. There is no such approach or system that the Commission will approve as such as being okay or not. Why? Because this is the decision taken during the negotiation process at that time, where, for instance, having a certain certification scheme, for instance, would not be enough as a green lane to say, okay, to comply with the regulation. The obligations are pretty much on the operators, has several steps to do, and it can use any means. So any approach, being this territorial approach, by the way, which is a wording that could be interpreted differently depending on who think about. It's like jurisdictional approach, territorial approach. There are several names for different conceptions. So just to talk about kind of approach, system, or any sort of this system, this can help, I'm sure, in any case, the operators to fulfill its obligation, but it cannot replace the obligation the EU operators has to fulfill. So this is a bit what I wanted to specify. Sometimes I have the feeling that there is a misunderstanding about such territorial approach. The Commission do not validate or stamp an approach or not. There are obligations that are clear in the regulation that we can discuss, needed to perform the risk assessment, giving information, the geolocation, risk assessment, risk mitigation, etc., which are Article 8, 9, 10, 11, and this is the obligation the operators need to fulfill. To do that, he can use any approach that are giving key informations needed. But there is no such an approach that the Commission would or would not allow on this specific element. So just wanted to make it clear, but we can also develop further if needed. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. We can build from that. Next question. Please, since our presenters are not necessarily super familiar with the coffee industry per se, the coffee organic products, you can say your name, your role, your organization, and what's your role as an organization. If you're a certifier, if you're a trader, so they could have a better idea about the question.
Thank you. My name is Annika. I work for PLAC, which is the producer network of Latin American, Caribbean, or fair trade farmers and workers. So we represent quite a lot of smallholder organizations in the region, trying to work towards, of course, compliance with the new regulations. Some of the concerns that we get from the producer organizations, and also can help me with a response we can share with them, is on data protection. So when they share data of their own farms and where they live and work, how does it work for them to ensure that there is protection of this data for them? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I assume the question was understood correctly. I don't know if Antoine Gabor or...
Yes, it was clear. Thank you very much. On this one, I will leave my colleague Gabor give you a reply.
Thank you for this question. This gives me the opportunity to elaborate a bit on the data protection aspects of the regulation and the information system. The Commission puts special emphasis on the data protection elements, including the personal data protection, that to ensure that the system meets the highest standards. Therefore, the information system itself is developed directly by the Commission, and it will be hosted in the so-called TRACES system, which is a system, for example, for the FLECT licenses, which might be familiar for you, but also hosts other Commission domains for animal health law, for customs issues, and also for other very important domains where such personal data is processed and managed. Any processing of the personal data falls under the regulation 2018-1722, so-called EU Data Protection Regulation, and also under the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Rules. I hope that this gives you the reassurances. Just to add to that, only those operators will have access to the geolocations, and nothing else from the producers are required apart from the geolocation of the plot of land. So only those operators will have access to it for which the first operator gave access. There will be an option when submitting a due diligence statement in the information system to hide the geolocation coordinates from buyers further down the supply chain. This communication about the traceability can happen outside of the system. So with that, I hope I clarified this a little bit further, but if you have further concerns, then please don't hesitate to share with us.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to read a question from the chat before, and then we'll continue with the audience. This is a question from the chat. Are there technical description or requirement for API connection with information system? Since we are a large company and need 3 to 6 months to prepare for such an activity. So are there technical description or requirement for API connection with information system?
Yes, the API technical specifications for the developers are available on the Commission website since middle of May, and already close to 100 economic operators have subscribed to develop such a system. A number of them have already passed the required conformance tests. So this means that in less than 1 month, it is possible to develop an API connection. So every interested stakeholders are invited to develop their API, and for that, the technical specifications are publicly available.
Excellent, Gabor. Thank you so much. We're going to another question. Niels had his hand up before, and then we'll go to the rest of the.
Thank you. Niels Haag, Conservation International. We're an environmental NGO. We're members of the EUDR multi-stakeholder platform. One question in building on the territorial approach question. I think in the FAQ document, there was a pretty clear explanation that declaration of access is accepted, which is closely connected to that territorial approach. So I wanted to confirm that in the upcoming FAQ, is there any revision of that foreseen? And in that FAQ, I think it's been a couple of weeks now that we've been hearing a couple of weeks. So is there a clear deadline that we can expect the FAQ? So that's one question. And the second question, somewhat unrelated, but I think we're here at this Specialty Coffee Association event where there's a lot of small and micro businesses. So I think a lot of the people in the room here would benefit from understanding what's the difference in terms of expectation and requirements from SMEs versus the larger companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels. Bernard Sultan, Antoine from the board want to take that. There were a couple of questions there. One about the different type of expectations between size of companies. The other one about declaration of excess, if there was foreseen any further clarification or, in the new FAQ around that. And the other one was about timing regarding the FAQs. You got them all. You got them all. Yeah, those were the questions, yes.
Maybe yes, I start with the third question on the declaration in excess, the so-called declaration excess. I know also that there are a lot of discussion, rumors. I mean, it's important to say some elements. First, this will be further developed in the FAQ. The FAQ documents, the new update will not make a turnaround on some concept or elements that are inside. This will just develop further, and specifically on the declaration in excess, to the possibility to declare more plots of land. The aim is to address this situation where when you have a relevant product, fully traced, not mixed. I mean, the idea is to being able to, when a fraction of this product is put on the market, to provide, as you know now, a larger pool of plots of land to say this might come to this pool of plot of land. So this possibility will is a possibility present in the FAQ. This will remain. The new version will specify under which circumstances this is possible to declare in excess. Let's put it like this. And also to try to kind of limit also this possibility with the background idea where it will not being able to declare, let's say, plots of land of 3 countries for a batch of coffee or cocoa coming. So we have some limits also linked to the information system technical possibilities. But this new version of FAQ will specify a bit more without changing the elements, meaning the possibility remains, but this will be a bit further specified in which circumstances it is foreseen. This is a bit what I could say. On the second question, I'm sorry, but I would ask you to quickly, briefly say it again, please. Just to be sure. Is there the difference between SMEs and large operator, is it?
Yes. Would there be any further difference in that depending on the size of company?
Yes, for the operators and also the traders, there is a difference in that. Starting from the traders, those traders that are non-SMEs, meaning the large traders, the obligations are the same as they would have been an operator. Now, when it comes to operators, the most important aspects of the difference between an SME and a non-SME operator is only when they are further down the supply chain, so when they are not an operator at the first placing on the market the relevant commodity or a relevant product. In case it is an operator further down the supply chain and due diligence has been exercised for the relevant product prior in the supply chain, then the non-SME operator shall ascertain that due diligence has been exercised. On the contrary, if this is an small and or medium enterprise operator, then it doesn't have to exercise due diligence. Nevertheless, it has to collect all relevant information and pass it on to the next member in the supply chain together with the reference number of the due diligence statement.
Thank you. I'm going to read a question from the chat and then we will go back to the floor for another question. Will products moving between EU countries, once they are in the EU, will they need to submit EDS between countries? Thinking about what is the mechanism that will work due to the borderless nature of EU countries. So once that the product is in the EU, moving between EU countries, do they need to submit TDS between countries?
About cooperation.
I'm sorry, but I will ask you, if possible, just to repeat the question because we can hardly hear.
Okay. Will products moving between EU countries, right, within the EU, between countries, once that they are in the EU, would the operators need to submit DDS to when they move from one country to another country within the EU?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Indeed, it all depends if a new product will be put on the market. Yes, a new due diligence will need to be produced. Basically, yes. But maybe my colleague Gabo, if he has some further info.
Yeah, so it pretty much depends whether these are different legal entities between which this transaction takes place. So if this transport takes place within the legal entity from one side to another, then this shouldn't be considered as placing on the market because this is not a supply to another supply chain member. But if this is transport from company A to company B within the European Union, then this is covered. And the role, whether this is an operator or trader, depends whether or not the product changes HS code at some point.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now we go to questions. There was somebody here with your name, the organization, and your role in the supply chain.
My name is Amir Hamza. I'm from Tanzania. I'm the chairman and CEO of my company, Amir Limited, and also I'm the chairman of the African Fine Coffee Association, and also chairman of National Quality Association, which is one of the beneficiaries of Markup 2 program. I have two questions. One question was regarding the soluble coffee, instant coffee. Is instant coffee on the listed products which have to get the certifications for deforestation before entering into the European Union? And the second question was, up to now, it is not clear that the regulations required by EUDR are known, but which companies or organizations are authorized to give certifications that once the company exporting the coffee to European Union obtains that certificate, then it is clear that this coffee is clear to enter into European Union. The problem which we are facing now at the farm gate level is that we found organization going from one farm to another farm and trying to do the geo mapping. And sometimes the authorities feel that this company will be now entering into contracts with those farmers that now you have to sell this coffee only to certain company. So it's very, very important for European Union authorities to clearly say which organizations are allowed to do the certifications, so that even without entering into any contracts with the farmers or the authorities, the farmer will be free to sell his coffee to any company provided he has got the certification of the regulations of deforestation. Thank you.
Thank you. Were the two questions understood properly?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe I start with the last one, and it's linked to what I've mentioned earlier on the approach. The EU cannot recommend or say which organization smallholders or small producers need to work with, or even if it needs to work with the ones. Actually, it's not as regard the certification. It's not how the regulation works. The operators needs to comply with some information, and if any company working with, for instance, certification body or certification schemes, and this is we specify in the guidance document, there are some elements that the company need to be aware. Does this scheme certification help me to have this specific information or not? But it's not mandatory to use such, as it is not mandatory, of course, for any producers, because the EU does not impose obligations on producers to use a certain company or not to map their farm. Actually, it's up to the producer. So there is no such obligation, and the EU cannot say to work with some specific companies. That was for the first question. The second question on the instant coffee, I will need to come back to you, because as regard the product scope, we know that there is some topic with the instant coffee that are not in the scope. So I will need to verify quickly. So I would not elaborate further on this one to be sure I give you the correct answer. So please bear with me, and I will come back to Miguel on this specific instant coffee topic.
Thank you so much, Antoine, for that. Other questions? It's a clarifying question. I'm going to just let her ask a clarifying question based on the previous one, Antoine. So here.
Hello, I just want to clarify what right now just said. So European Commission or European delegation cannot like tell someone how do you certify or which company certifies you. Is that correct?
Yes, so quickly about the certifications or verification schemes. These can be used in the risk mitigation, and this can be, of course, beneficial for the operator who places on the European market these products. But the Commission, indeed, just like you rightly pointed out, does not intervene which certification or auditing bodies the operators can use. What the guidance document will elaborate on is how or what elements the operators need to take into account when they use such certifications or products that are certified, and to review what extent these certifications or verifications cover from their obligations. But nevertheless, in all cases, it is going to be the operator that places such product on the market that will be held liable in case of non-compliance.
And if I can complement further as well on something that we are seeing, it's like since some months or a year now, we see indeed the increase of many companies that try to sell themselves as the best EUDR compliant tool. So there is a big market about that. And this is why also the Commission is taking very serious this question by focusing on what's the obligation for the operator. To use a certification scheme is not mandatory at all. You can do a due diligence dossier, this risk assessment, etc., without the need of any external body. This is a possibility. Some certification schemes are quite good. Some others, I don't know. But in some case, in any case, it's not mandatory. So the idea is to focus on what are the obligations of the operators, meaning what the regulation says that I, as a company, needs to do. And sometimes it's not needed complex or very specific big work that a service provider is telling you it's the best way to go. And it costs a lot of money. So we have also to debunk a bit this myth that you need absolutely to have a certification scheme or body, which is not the case. But this is why our answer is about focusing on the need to operators the obligations, because this is here the core elements, and sometimes you would see that it's not necessary to have a super complex detailed scheme or something else. So this is where our answer comes from, to give a bit of perspective, and that we are well aware of the market sometimes, and that can be also difficult to move in between all those elements.
Excellent, Antoine. Thank you so much. We're going to another question here. Name, organization, and the role in the value chain.
Hi, I'm the CEO of Meta, a satellite analytics company. I'm helping with the EUDR due diligence. And I have a specific question about the EU tracer system. So specifically on the definition of a producer. So is it really necessary, because you need to add information, contact information on the producer? Is it really necessary to go down to the farmer level? Because in some cases, maybe the farmer cannot provide further contact information like an email address or so. Or will it also be sufficient to go onto the level of the cooperative or some other type of organization as a producer? So some further clarification on the definition of what is a producer in the system, because if you need this contact information and it's like a mandatory field in traces, and if this data is there, then this of course is an issue.
Thank you. Want to take that one?
Thank you. About this, the traceability has to be ensured to the plot of land level. Nevertheless, such associations or corporations can act as an authorized representative, for example, in case they are based in Europe, to provide all the geolocation coordinates in case the operator wishes to nominate or designate an authorized representative, but this has to be established within Europe. But once again, the traceability has to be to plot of land level, so the associated plots has to be flagged in the due diligence statement. But for this, in case this is not possible, then declaration in access is allowed. But in this case, and in all cases, of course, the operator has to take responsibility for all the declared plots of lands.
And if I can complement to give also a bit of context on this one, and by the way, it's more like the definition of plots of land rather than producer in the name of the regulation, but this is just a point of detail, but this is why we are mentioning plots of land. The best way to ensure deforestation is to go to where the product has been produced to ensure there is no tree cut on this specific area. This is the rationale behind the negotiations process that happened 2 years ago now on the method retained, because there were this possibility to go a bit larger and to have maybe at the regional level just to mention this product come from this region, but the idea was to go to the plots of land. This is why it's so important in the regulation, the notion of farm plots of land, to ensure the product, to link the traceability to this. As Gabor mentioned, and we discussed it earlier, there is this possibility, in case it's complicated, to give several plots to say this product comes from this pool of farms. But again, this is the rationale behind the idea of plots of land.
Thank you so much for the answer. Additional question? We have again, then we got both of you. Name, organization, and your role.
Max Fabian from Denus. I had other roles. I had in associations and organizations. But I maybe it's a repetition my question, but I struggle to understand. The coffee is not produced in Europe. Due diligence statement is asked several times. Why not just at custom clearance? One of the things that's declared within the regulation is that the will of the European Union is not to increase the bureaucratic burden without use. So given that, again, coffee is not produced in Europe, custom clearance yeah, the due diligence statement of custom clearance would get the target. So I struggle to understand why this due diligence statement needs to be repeated every time afterwards. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so about the customs clearance and the due diligence statements, these are, how to put it, complementary documents. So the customs clearance provides a set of information, and the due diligence statements provides, for example, the geolocation coordinates, which are not in the customs declaration, for example. And also to mention that for domestic production within the European Union, there is no customs clearance. And the regulation applies equally and even-handedly both for products imported from third countries and both for products within the European Union. The additional detail that the operator that lodges the customs declaration has to introduce in the customs form or in the customs declaration is the reference number of the due diligence statements, which creates the link between the customs declaration and the due diligence statement itself.
Excellent, thank you so much. There's another question here. Name, organization, and your role in the supply chain.
My name is Mr. Shatri from India. I'm a producer and on behalf of cooperative. Till the date, we know that for deforestation, new EUDR implementation training. We know that farmers cooperative has to provide the data, just like a geolocation or else with any other data we require in future. But my question is that traceability, how the traceability factor assures to the buyer that the activities taken by the farmers are will not fall under the or fall under the deforestation activity. Because there are several. I think personally, I feel that there is much more deep trainings required for the farmers groups regarding the which activities fall under deforestation and which activities will not fall under deforestation. Because as defined in the three categories of forest categories in the EU regulation, apart from the three forest categories, we have several more three, four other categories of forest categories in India. And also sometimes local government, I don't know about the other countries, local government rules are promoting, sometimes it looks like promoting the deforestation activities, just like the artificial forest formation. The artificial forest formation is, I feel that it's just like equivalent to the deforestation because it looks like a forest promotion, but it's not a natural forest promotion. And also, in some cases, legalizing the encroachment activity, which tempting our farmers, our cooperative farmers to do that work. But we cooperatives, how? I mean, there is a training is required for the cooperatives how to restrict all these activities and which activities will fall under deforestation, which will not fall under deforestation. Thank you.
Was the question clear?
No, it's difficult to hear via the mic. So I think I have some ideas, but if you can just quickly summarize the key points of the information, because it was also a kind of a statement, I think, at some point. But I would need just a sense, please, of the questions to being able to reply.
Would you mind just summarizing a little bit more the question? The camera is there, so maybe also if you look at the camera over there, that might be easier for them to see.
The parameters for the traceability with the EU regulation, EU selected by just like the coordinates, the geo coordinates, etc. How they ensure for the buyers that the deforestation activity, whether it is whether going on or was not going on. I mean, which activity, there is a much specific training to the cooperatives or producer groups is needed to clearly bifurcating which activities of the farmers will fall under deforestation activity, which activities will not fall under deforestation activity.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can give you some reply, and it's important also in the understanding on how the whole regulation works to touch upon this member states competent authority aspect, because indeed there is one part which is giving the geolocation data or giving some information that are provided in the regulation, but there is also a question on how this will be assessed or then what, how to ensure that the data are correct, how to ensure that there is indeed deforestation or not. So this is also where the member states or the EU member states, the competent authority plays a role, because they would be at the end the bodies that will ensure the correct application of the rules. So they will be using different tools, being satellite imagery, being the EU Observatory, also any other tools that are more developed to go a bit deeper on the ground. They have also cooperation tools among customs or any other tool they might use by asking the company and the companies the different information of the due diligence to make a case and to go deeper into the idea of verifying the information. The information system we are talking about, we were talking about, has two entry points, one for operators, so companies, and the other one is for competent authorities, so member states, that they will have a specific entrance to have access to the information, to being able to verify the coordinates, to verify via satellite imagery whether or not the information are correct, and also the information about which company has put those information based on what, to being able to contact them in case they need to contact them. So this is pretty much about the competent authority, how they will ensure the information are correct. One element from our side as Commission, we are working, as I mentioned earlier, closely with them to ensure correct implementation and that any product that enters in Rotterdam or in other ports, the same rules applies and competent authority are working the same way on the same basis. So this is a bit what I could say on this question.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have another question. Here, name, organization, and your role in the value chain.
Hello, my name is Natalia. I am the ESG manager at Cochupé, a coffee cooperative in Brazil. So my question is, we all the Brazilians, we have a platform together. So it's with our exporters council, it's called Secafé. And we built this platform with Serasa Experience. So one of our clients, they asked us if when we deliver the geolocalization and all the information, they want us to give this information before we send the container, because they're a little bit afraid if this information when gets there and maybe so the EU says that no, there is deforestation in one container. So my question is, I want to know like if our platform is recognized or something like this, because we have the geolocalization and all the polygons, and we are sure that this polygon has no is deforestation free. So, but all these clients are asking, okay, but if when it enters the EU and the EU says no, maybe there is deforestation. Like, who will prove this? Like, can we be sure that our data, we can send it and okay, that's okay. We know we're sure that there's no deforestation, but is there any chance that the EU will say no, with our map, we will say that it's deforestation?
Thank you. Was the question understood?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for this question. The regulation doesn't work on a permission basis. So this is not like the FLEGT regulation when the country issues a FLEGT license, which needs to be checked and validated by the competent authority. In the due diligence statement, the operator assumes responsibility that it has exercised due diligence and the product is compliant with the regulation, meaning that this is sourced from plots of lands which hasn't been subject to deforestation. The competent authorities can carry out checks on such due diligence statements and on the operators before the products enter the European market. But usually this takes place only after this check on the operator and the product itself takes place after the product was released for free circulation. The competent authorities of the member states will coordinate and cooperate very closely with the customs authorities, and they will, of course, have their own risk-based approach, and they can carry out checks on those consignments and on those operators that they see the riskiest, so to say, that they would place on the market products that are non-compliant, but we don't envisage that such controls before the placing on the market will take place in a big extent. We will see on how the competent authorities will carry out the controls and how they will enforce. But for the moment, we haven't heard that they will focus on pre-customs declaration products.
Excellent, thank you. We have one last question here, and then we'll go to the rest of the program. We still have two additional presenters. That's going to talk a little bit more about what has been done to understand different service providers supporting EUDR implementation, and also what companies are doing to realize that and where the early learning. Name, organization?
Hi, my name is Joseph. I work for Fair Trade on innovation. Can you hear me okay? I see you leaning in. Is it okay? Yes.
Yes, please, if you can speak a bit louder in the mic, it
Okay,
would be perfect because it's a bit difficult. Thank you.
I just wanted to, it's a simple question, understand what the European Union is doing to monitor and potentially communicate on readiness, both in terms of producer level readiness and also market readiness for implementation as of today, and any scenario planning we might be doing to kind of see how that might go on the deadline.
Thank you for that very direct and short questions. Indeed, the deadlines and the regulation as set, the deadlines and the dates as set in the regulation are the ones we have presented, and we are working along those deadlines. I can assure you that from the obligation of the Commission, we will be ready, in particular with the information system, which is well advanced, which is a core element of the regulation. But on other topics, we are working on the current deadlines, and this is the scenario, I would say, and where we put all our energy and forces to make it ready for the entry into application, and a bit in advance indeed, because of to give time to people to adapt. And in any case, this regulation will be up and running fully entry into application in end of December, January 25, and then starts running with the due diligence statement, etc.
Excellent, thank you so much. Angelica, we're going to go to the next presentation, if you put it up there. And I want to thank all of our presenters for the time. We spent a good amount of time answering questions. And thank you so much, everybody, for taking also the time to answer the question. We're going to talk a little bit more about, again, same topic, but with a little bit more information about the work that we have been doing at International Coffee Organization, the Coffee Public-Private Task Force, to try to understand a little bit more what's there available and what people are doing and thinking around the EUDR implementation. We're lucky to have here Hannelore, who has been doing a lot of work on this topic with many companies and many service providers all over the world, and she will talk a little bit more about this work. Hannelore, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Thank you also, Mrs. Vanusia, for the introduction. TBS3 is a technical working stream. It's a platform, a public-private platform with also presence of country coffee boards or institutions, private sector associations, NGOs, certification mechanisms, and lately also service providers on compliance. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's important to mention that this is an open group. So anybody who would like to join every meeting or some meetings is welcome. Yeah? We have monthly meetings, let's say. And we're also trying to stay very well in touch with the other technical working groups of the CPPTF, who also work on coffee, on essential elements as living income, market transparency, cost of production, landscape approaches, national coffee platforms. Why do I say that? Because the EUDR is only one of the due diligence regulations, one of the EU, of course, that is coming. There's many others coming, and we will need to work closely together also with the other working streams to try to support the sector to implement them. What has the TBS3 on, which specifically looks into policies of importing countries, has been done the last 2 years based on demands of its members. First, we have made a mapping and a screening and even an analysis of the global due diligence regulations that could affect coffee and that were in the make or had been validated. And of course, we held discussions around that. This has been updated and is now also hosted by the ICO. This mapping. Secondly, we've made a mapping and a screening of 440 support projects for sustainable coffee. These are public and private projects, and this has been made available via an online tool in cooperation with ITC and ICO. And then today we will talk about a survey that we have done of service providers, 31 today, that deliver services for EUDR compliance to the coffee sector, and so to the operators or traders in the coffee sector. We can go to the next slide. I will quickly say, why did we do that? So there was a big demand of the members of, or the participants of this group to understand better what's on the market. Yeah, but at the same time, how can we judge what's on the market? I think Antoine from DG Environment said there's so many services popping up, but what is a good service for what I need and what do I need to look into? Yeah. So based on that question, we did a few things. We invited several service providers to come and explain their services. So that we started to get the language better in our fingers and understand what was on the market. And secondly, we also did a survey to service providers. If we would have focused on service providers for traceability, we would have found more than 600 solutions today for coffee for traceability. But what we did was to focus on who delivers or who says to deliver deforestation analysis at plot level for EUDR in coffee today. So not the ones who are planning it. Are you offering services today in coffee that include a deforestation analysis at plot level according to the EUDR definition, the FAO definition of deforestation? So that was our basis. We identified 70, of which we got reply in first instance of 27, and now we're adding 4 more. Of course, this is not comprehensive. It also doesn't mean that these methods are validated, not by our group, certainly not by DG Environment or the competent authorities. We also don't judge the methods, yeah? But we show how they differentiate from each other and what some deliver, what some don't deliver. Yeah? We see that some countries are starting to produce their own systems, and some very well regulated countries already have their own systems. We haven't included them. Yeah? So we really looked at commercial service providers that are in the market today to find solutions with you. It's not comprehensive, so we will talk about trends. Also, it's very fluid. It's under evolution. We have very often remarks of service providers like, yeah, but we are trying to do this, or we will start to do that. And that's why we will do an update in September, so that all service providers can really say, what have we focused on that you can use still before going into application. Let's quickly run through the trends. The trends are based on the analysis of the survey, which is available. We have distributed it already, but you can still ask for it. But it's also based on additional interviews, on additional discussions I've had with coffee associations, so the private sector associations, and ECF will speak after me. Isabel is here. But also from coffee associations in producing countries and with representatives of producing countries. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, so that is what the database looks like. It's very dry, but we didn't spend too much energy in cleaning it up. Why not? Because it's so urgent that you can work on it and work with it. So we thought that every day counts. You will see on the top level, capturing different columns are the services that these service providers include for geolocation. You can go to the next slide. You will see, is there any geolocation included in your service? Yes, then you will see a green one, and then the details on how they do it. Yeah. Next slide, please. After geolocation, we also look into what do you offer for traceability, what do you offer for deforestation, what do you offer on legality. So you always first have, do we do anything on it or not? Right? So, and we don't judge, some do it, some don't do it. And then we ask specifically, how do you do it? How do you include farmers? What does the client get? What does the farmer get? Yeah. So that is the structure of the database. It is available. Let's now go into the trends that we observed. That will be with the next slide, please. Good. We don't only see different methods and different techniques used, but we see completely different concepts used. Yeah. So to diversify, and if you want to have a real insight in what is available in the market, you would need to ask first, but what concept do you use? Some really focus on, we don't leave anybody behind, so it has to be inclusive. And then you come very quickly in a concept of declaration and access at different levels, very often at the cooperative level, in fact. Others really go for empowerment of farmers from the start. They invest a lot in the capacity of the farmer to do partly their own due diligence, to find their own ways or apps for geolocations. So this is also clearly a concept that is important in the service. And so if you are an actor that finds that important, you could choose for that service. Some are really very much value oriented. I just need a due diligence statement. I buy from these farmers, give me the minimum, yeah, which is also, of course, very relevant. We don't judge, but you see that that is also a concept. And some really go for the vulnerability focus. So where is the biggest opportunity for mitigation of deforestation? And that are often actors that are very much actively involved in prevention of deforestation. So these are the concepts already. That's the difference. Yeah. Obviously, to make these concepts work, your methods and your techniques will also be different. So there is a link, of course. Good. Do you pay or do you not pay? We find that 1/5 is for free. So there is quite some methods that are for free. But of course, you will have less details on some aspects, which in some cases is also not needed, all the details. So, but 1/5 is for free. And some schemes offer free layers, yeah, so that you can say, if you only want this, you don't pay. If you want more, you pay a bit more. So that is also what we see. Many are risk-based, meaning that they do a first screening and see what is the risk for deforestation and where is the risk, and that they then add additional layers and additional actions and additional proofs based on this focused approach of the risk. Some schemes allow for integration of existing data of the company. Many companies have the data of the cooperatives. They also have data of the country. And some even start from there. Yeah, they first see what do you have already, how can we integrate it, and then they see what don't you have. So what do we add? What we see that systematically, not always, but almost always is lacking is a fine historical deforestation map at cutoff point. I think Antoine and Gabor explained that the GRC Observatory, Forest Observatory map is being refined, but most methods go do ground truthing if they find if they think there is deforestation, if there's a risk, and then ask the farmer, is it really deforested or not? Yeah. So the cutoff point for coffee, the information at cutoff point is very rare to find it fine enough to distinguish it from agroforestry, forests, and other systems, other coffee systems under shade. The price structure really depends on the concept, whether it's risk-based or not. What we do see is that the prices are going down of the services since last year. Let's go to the next slide, please, Miguel. I think I'll have to go a little bit faster. Now we will look at the trends per service: geolocations, deforestation check, traceability, legality. Okay, we start with geolocation. If for the 27 that had completed the survey when I did the analysis, because there's 4 more now, but I haven't been able to include them yet. 23 provide geolocations and polygons. For the others, it means that you have to provide them, and then they can do, for example, a deforestation check or a legality check. 11 service providers of the 27 have an independent external check of geolocations and polygons. So they have an extra service on that. 8 of the schemes can include existing public data, which in some countries can be very relevant. It all depends on the country and the situation and the value chain structure you are in, how interesting this is. In 13 of the 27, the farmers get access to their geolocation polygon information. Yeah, you can say this is not a lot. So this means that this information goes with the trader further downstream in the value chain and doesn't return to the farmer. And this is for competition issues, yeah, because the farmers then could use it for other traders. I thought it would have been less. So I think it's hopeful that there's already 13 of the 27 where the farmers get also access to the analyzed and cleaned up information of their geolocation polygon. The geolocation points with GPS seem to be, I got a lot of comments orally, but also even in the questionnaire on that, in the not cleaned up questionnaire, that it's very sensitive, let's say in general. They don't know where the point ends, you know, if there's discussion on deforestation. The cleaning of the data of GPS points seems to be not so obvious. There seems to be hacking of data if the GPS points are collected by mobile phones. So there is something to say about that. We can clear it out if necessary and if a priority, it is not so obvious. We often get the comments that it's very cumbersome. All the polygons of all the plots, it takes years and it needs to be updated yearly. So I think a lot of frustration that you might feel with the private sector certainly comes from there. It's the start. And it's also clear what DG Environment says, we can't do it without. Yeah? So, but it's not easy. We discussed already the challenges of data privacy. So in the beginning, we talked a lot about the data privacy from the point of view of the farmer. Yeah, but the farmer doesn't have to give his name and email address necessarily. They have to give polygon, plot information. Yeah, but now it turns to be much more the issue of trade information that can be leaked and seen through the EU information system. But I think we have had comments and explanations on that, but also for the service providers. They build up databases, and then these databases can be seen by others, copied or used by others. That is how it's perceived. But I think DG Environment already limited that comment a little bit. Next slide, please. Let's look at the deforestation analysis. What do we see in the 27 schemes that have been analyzed? These are really the biggest schemes that we find. The smaller ones. So we wrote to 70 of them that we identified. The smaller ones sometimes said we don't dare to answer yet. We first want to see what the bigger ones answer. So we expect in September more replies. Yeah, but these are certainly the bigger ones. Even if one of the criteria to identify the service providers was that they had to already provide services on deforestation analysis. According to EUDR definition, we still find some that don't use the EUDR definition. So always check twice. Do they really use the EUDR definition of deforestation? Copernicus seems to be the most frequent basic layer used to detect deforestation. The resolution is not so high, but I'm writing here, and my colleagues that are not here today, we write basic layer because they add other layers and other methods, but that's still the basic layer to test. The accuracy is not mentioned. When we asked afterwards, the accuracy, it differs a lot between, some say 0%, so let's say it's really minimal, to 30% errors. And I think that the person from India also already mentioned that it remains really problematic to identify what is really deforestation. Artificial intelligence for the deforestation check, and sometimes also to determine the polygons, but especially for the deforestation check, is very, very common. It's most have it, yeah. Some don't do extra ground truthing anymore after the artificial intelligence. Yeah, so they can train, of course, their algorithm with ground truthing, but then they don't add ground truthing anymore. For me, this was surprisingly high. Yeah. 4 don't use satellite images for the deforestation check, and I think that's also important to know. You can be in a situation or being a trader that you're so close to the farmers that you can use other tools or methods to determine deforestation. And the EUDR also doesn't prescribe that you have to use satellite images. So I was also surprised that there's 4 of the 27 that don't use any satellite images. So the artificial intelligence is used a lot. But there's a lot of differentiation between how they use it. You can discover that yourself in the database. So not all are fully automated. There's different levels of inclusion of maps, satellite maps, of ground truthing in the training of the model. Some add pixels, existing land classification methods. It's very clever, the way they go about it, but it depends also on the context. Yeah, it's not always available everywhere. And some, a minority, have trained systems per ecosystem and per country. Yeah, so they train their system per country. So they have a specific learning system per country. If you really need detailed information that you can't make any other extra effort for information, these are the most these are the best maps. But you don't maybe always need it. Okay, next. Miguel, can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. I'm staying with. Okay. We're going to the traceability and legality. I'll be a bit shorter. So of the 27 schemes that offer deforestation check, also 20 schemes provide traceability services. That's high, I think. So they include the end-to-end solution, and 5 use a blockchain approach. And there, I think we see an aspect that we all need to look in. Only 2 of these schemes that provide traceability today. It can change, but today for non-organized farmers. In many countries, we have a high percentage of non-organized farmers in coffee today. Can also change, but this is worrying. And this makes everybody think, of course, how to not exclude them, how can we include them and still keep the traceability reliable. The information we get on how do you assess the risk of that your coffee batch, whether it's already a container or not, is not mixed with any other coffee that could include deforestation is very vague. The information we get, except of course for the blockchain approach. So there is something there to improve as well. 20 schemes say that they include due diligence on legality requirements, although there's a lot of questions on how to do that, and I think DG Environment is very aware of that. what we find is that the ones that do include it have two, let's say, two phases. They first look at what is the legal framework and where are the hotspots of illegality in terms of geography or in terms of thematic aspects. And then in their system, they will focus on these aspects. Yeah, so or in the territory or in the way they approach it, they will look at specific teams. Yeah. And then some use declarations of villages, of farmers, of cooperatives. We are legal. Yeah? Some use services. Yeah? So that means that farmers have to every time reply to other services. Every time another trader comes with and with another service provider, they need to again answer services on the legality. And some also use elements, information that is included in certifications. So I think that's certainly an element where you can use information collected by certifications. There are some indications, and I was positively surprised because in fact it wasn't a question. There were some indications that finding mitigation strategies for illegality was important. So for example, if they found the working conditions of certain farmers or wage workers not good, that they try to find ways to mitigate it or to contribute to mitigation. So some also go quite far, yeah. Because of the limitation to really bring it to map it completely, but at least when you meet real offenses on social or human rights or on legal aspects of land, they would already look into it. Again, there's challenges from data privacy, especially of farmers and their legality. Yeah, I think that's an obvious one that we have to find ways on how to go about the data privacy of legality of farmers. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Okay, Hannelore, we're running out of time too, so maybe we can.
Yes. Okay. Good. Let's stop here. That's okay. Yeah, we can distribute the slides and we will certainly talk about it in TVS3 as well. So, and everybody is welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Hannelore, for sharing information about all of the work that's happening in Technical Workstream 3 on this topic, all of the new work as you continue and the team continues working on this. And now we're going to go to Isabel. Isabel, if you're there, you're not showing slides, but then if you can be there, and then Hannelore, if you can stay, because we will do Q&A after Isabel. If we make sure that we give that to Isabel. Isabel Lemmet from the European Coffee Federation, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We wanted to hear a little bit more about a little bit of private sector, what companies have been doing and what early learnings we have from the different initiatives that they're doing to try to comply with EUDR. And Isabel excited to talk to us a little bit about that. So Isabel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you, Vanusia, for organizing this workshop. I see the time, so I will try to go fast. So quickly, a first introduction to ECF, the European Coffee Federation. We are the voice of the European coffee trade and industry towards the EU institutions. So we do represent about 90% of the EU coffee imports and 35% of the coffee traded volume in the world. And through a membership, we speak for over 750 companies, which would be the companies classified as operators and traders in the EUDR. So to go quickly back to some of the basic challenges for EUDR, is that coffee is grown in more than 60 countries on 12.5 million coffee farms, out of which 95% are smaller than 5 hectares and 84% smaller than 2 hectares, with a large part of the coffee production taking place in the informal economy, meaning that the basic requirements of EUDR, including the mapping of the plots of land, already represents an important challenge in the sector in such a short implementation timeframe. And we have to keep in mind that the harvest season has started in some countries already for this year, and this coffee would need to be compliant with EUDR provisions, as it will be the coffee that will be imported in the EU as of the end of the year. And so from a private sector perspective, we would like to highlight 4 points that are missing, but crucial in our view to be able to implement smoothly the regulation. And just to be clear, we understand that the Commission is under a lot of pressure and that the political validation process takes time. Nevertheless, at this point, we're still waiting for the Q&A and the official guidance document, knowing that the entry into application takes place in 6 months, which leaves already insufficient time for companies to adapt their processes and get ready to be in line with the EUDR and the information system. Firm laws and companies have diverging interpretations. And we have seen with this elephant in the room, with this territorial approach that has been adopted by some, that might not be considered as compliant, and that we need to specify more broadly the declaration in excess. So we do see an issue there in terms of clarity, because several producing countries have signed agreements for this approach. And so what does it mean exactly for those countries? This might have like heavy implications, including trade disruptions for coffee produced in those origins. We also need clarity on basic requirements for due diligence to be compliant with EUDR in terms of risk assessment and risk mitigation. As mentioned earlier by the Commission, by Anna-Laure, there are many service providers offering different services that are promoted as compliant with EUDR. So we have heard, like from DJ Trade, that they're going to publish shortly a repository of best practices for due diligence and criteria to analyze the reliability of the different schemes. And this will bring more clarity to the private sector. So we do really welcome this initiative. In terms of legality requirements, this is another important point that we want to stress. I mean, what exactly do we need to look at in terms of verifiable information regarding coffee having been produced in accordance with the legislation of countries of production? The EU is inviting producing countries to compile such lists and making them available to the operators. This is not a realistic approach for EUDR implementation, especially in this time frame. And then the benchmarking system. This is another point that we want to stress. So the process has been a bit delayed. So every country would be classified as standard risk by default. Irrespective of the country of origin, you would need like the full-fledged due diligence obligations. Many countries have not anticipated this possibility, the same as the operators. And this is also valid for countries in the EU. So we do need like to have this benchmarking, at least to know the low-risk countries, to be able to have how deep we need to look into the risk assessment and risk mitigation aspects for each origin. In spite of those missing aspects, let's say, we remain fully committed to the spirit of the EUDR, and we will continue to work to ensure that the overall objective set out by the EU, which means like tackling deforestation, is met by everyone in the sector. Nevertheless, we want to avoid unintended consequences, especially for the smallholder farmers, which represent 82% of all coffee farmers. So over the past decades, actually the coffee sector has been involved in many initiatives to improve sustainability, fairness, and transparency along the supply chain. The key principle was really to improve the living conditions of local farmers, to establish more sustainable and fair practices in the coffee value chain, while contributing to economic progress for local coffee farming communities. And key drivers of better land management and reforestation in producing countries have been the escalation of agroforestry, as well as crop diversification and improvement of the yield. We have also seen a big evolution of the processes, tools, and technologies around different sustainability standard schemes, with the more prevalent being in the green coffee sustainability certification programs. In addition, since the publication of the EUDR, the European private sector's efforts have been focused on identifying ways to ensure the implementation. So we have done a lot of awareness raising with the global coffee communities, also in producing countries at different levels. And we have also reinforced the ties with the coffee national associations and exporters associations in producing countries to explain better EUDR, the possible implications, as well as to gather their input and feedback that we could also share with the Commission and with the different stakeholders in Europe. So we have really focused on bringing clarity on the requirements of the EUDR due diligence to ensure that we could all comply with this piece of legislation. We have also collaborated with the European Space Programme Agency to work and assess the tools made available by Copernicus and Galileo for the implementation of EUDR. We have supported the ICO in the mapping collection of the service providers, so as Anne-Laure was presenting earlier. And as an example of our latest efforts, we're currently working on different collective solutions, and we are contemplating the development of a conformity mechanism that would aim to help evaluate and verify the different due diligence procedures to ensure that they meet the EUDR predefined requirements whilst enhancing the quality of the process and facilitating market access. But for that part, we also need like a validation from the EU to say that we are on the right track and we need the clarity that I mentioned earlier. To conclude on a positive note, we can say that one of the best aspects of EUDR is that it has brought together the coffee sector as a whole across the globe. So through like the understanding of the regulation provisions and exchanging of best practices to find workable solutions. And as ECF, we truly believe that the implementation of EUDR requires private-public partnership at different levels, including at the local level, as well as strong collaboration among stakeholders to try to find the best tailor-made approaches for the different country origin. And another positive aspect is also like the different funding opportunities, including from the EU, really to focus on the coffee sector. So thank you.
Thank you so much,
Isabel.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and for providing a little bit of the feedback from the industry, especially from the industry in Europe, that are many members that you have been working with to try to understand a little bit more how to comply with UDR and some of the challenges that you so well have outlined. I wanted to give space for people in the chat, also here, if you have any questions, or Anne-Laure about the information, the survey that she mentioned of service providers working on UDR implementation. As she mentioned, you can be part of this if you want to join and learn more about the work that's happening by joining the meetings of Technical Working 3. And there is always good information coming out from all of the work that she's doing. So if there are questions about that or questions about some of the comments and remarks that Isabel mentioned around the challenges that many companies are facing and also the opportunities that UDR can bring. We have one question here, and we will do a couple of questions. Your name and your organization, please.
Thank you. Michel Pesch from the government of Espírito Santo State, Brazil. Good to see you again, Anne-Laure.
Michel, very good to see you. I can see you.
Yeah, I'd like to share that we are putting in place a kind of project with all investigators working exactly on one of the topics that we see that is most challenging, that it's mapping the coffee areas through the years. Most of we have now is based on photo interpretation. So we need the photos, and we need a high group of people watching to the screen and checking the polygons. What we're trying to do is connecting some kind of our university and our rural extension service and research to develop a methodology that can be shared with other regions that will want this, to map using artificial intelligence and machine learning, but also with a higher number of field validation, because we have this kind of people in field, and we need to train the models to reach a good accuracy and precision. So what I'm trying to say, Anne-Laure, that we could connect this kind of researchers with your initiative, and you will have some concerns about the next step when the European Commission or some kind of country commission starts to make some checking in the information. Which system, which basis they will use to check that the information sent in the trade operation is correct. Which basis they are looking to use to verify if that has or not deforestation. I think it's not in the table now, but the next step it could occur, and we have also saw that JRC needs to improve a lot the interpretation in the field. I think it is solved. Thank you.
Thank you for the remarks. So there is also like more of a suggestion about what can come next, right, for the survey. So I don't know if there is any additional, we're getting close to the end of the time, any additional question or remark from the public or not? Well, Hannah, that was more of a suggestion of what may come next from the process. So I don't know if the other presenters can come online. We can see the camera of Antoine and Sultan, if you're still there. I just wanted to thank you all from all of us for taking the time to talk today with us about information coming from your organizations, telling us all of the work that you're doing and trying to answer questions. We spent a good amount of time on Q&A because that was very important to us. We wanted to make sure that people had enough time to answer specific questions, as we had discussed also in the planning of the session. And thank you everybody for taking that time and asking your questions. There were a lot of answers, there was a lot of guidance. We know that there is still a lot more that needs to come. I think that Sultan, Antoine, Gabor are very clear on that, and they have mentioned, I think that some of the clarifications have been very helpful. We know that there's a lot more to come, and from the International Coffee Organization, our commitment to continue getting information from the EU, information from different people working on EUDR, to make sure that you have the most updated information on this topic. But I just wanted to make sure to thank you all. If we can, you can join me in a big applause to everybody who today presented. And also, really now the applause you cannot hear really well, but it's really, really loud. Thank you. And to everybody also in the chat, thank you for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it very much. So thank you everybody, and we're on time.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you very much.
Michelle will be in touch. I'll come by helicopter, okay? Thank you.
He says yes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.